So at this point, I guess I should also mention that we've got a couple. Like I say, we've really got two coalitions now. France is no longer kind of by itself. In the War of the First Coalition, France is kind of fighting everybody alone. But now, Holland, parts of Italy, Norway, they've all joined with France against Britain, Austria, parts of Germany, parts of the German states, Russia, so on and so forth. So the war commences, and the Lovell is, of course, sailing into this. Now, in 1798, the Lovell gets a bit of an upgrade. It's been traveling around. It's been doing most of its commerce between Newfoundland and Portugal at Oporto, one of the older cities in Portugal. It's been kind of moving back and forth there. But in 1798, two major things happen. First of all, the ship becomes armed. 12 6-pound cannons. Now again, 6-pound cannons are not huge cannons. We're not talking about the HMS Victory here. We're not talking about a big battleship, but we're talking about 12 cannons. We're talking about 12 small cannons in order to defend itself against other ships as it's sailing along. But again, it's now an armed vessel. And at the same time, in October of that same year, it receives a letter of marque, which basically allows it to be a privateer, which basically means it's allowed to kind of conduct acts that heretofore would have been piracy, so it can capture other ships, it can steal other cargoes, as long as it cuts the king or the British government into the loot, I guess, such as it is. It can take other ships as a prize, it can steal other cargoes, but a portion of the money that they get from doing that is paid to the British government to kind of, for kind of licensing, I guess, them to do so. So what happens here is that now suddenly this ship takes on kind of a quasi-military role. It's not part of the Royal Navy for sure, but it is kind of now sanctioned by the British government to kind of go out, to find other ships from the other side, from France, from other places, and capture them. And it has a monetary incentive to do so. However, it doesn't take too long. We're into, I believe, the first part of 1799, I believe it's in April. I could be wrong, but I believe it's in April of 1799. The Lovell does end up meeting ships from the other side, but unfortunately, it meets 4 of them, 4 Dutch frigates on their way from Suriname, coming up from South America. The Lovell coming across traveling across the Atlantic Ocean from Newfoundland over to Europe. And the two sides meet. Now, a single frigate is carrying much more armament and cannon than the Lovell is, but there are 4 of them, so it makes it a much more difficult proposition. So for those of you who saw our play last year, we did a little feature on this naval action, such as it was. Captain John Bowden, of course, was the master of the ship at this time. We don't know what exactly transpired on that day on the seas. We just know that the Lovell was captured. Now, of course, in the play, we kind of suppose that maybe the Lovell tried to make a run for it, tried to ditch some weight, tried to fire back, but just couldn't make a go of it. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. It's not really clear. What we do know is that the Lovell was captured, and not long after it was captured, it was immediately, I guess, taken to Bergen in Norway, where it spent the next little while. In 1802, the Peace of Amiens came about that ended the war between France and Britain for another couple of years. So we see at this time the Lovell is now free to go. Subsequently, The War of the Third Coalition starts not very long after that, by 1805. Another coalition forms against France. By this time, they are now fighting Napoleonic France because Napoleon has crowned himself of Emperor of the French. The Lovell now is operating out of some of the South American ports that had been the home to the 4 Dutch frigates that had captured it in 1799. So the course of the war kind of changes, at least in South America. The British sort of gobble up a lot of Dutch territories, and the colonial territories of those who were assisting the French. And so again, with their navy, they're able to do this. France really never finds the answer for the Royal Navy, and so the Britain is really kind of able to kind of use its navy to kind of project its power around the world, but it has a hard time kind of being able to bring that authority into Europe, and so it finds coalition partners, mostly in Austria, but also in Russia and in Prussia and in other places. But anyway, that's kind of outside the scope of this. I just thought it was really interesting that the Lovell is now operating out of South America and from the same ports that its captors had come from years earlier. So we don't know what happens to the Lovell. It's eventually sold in Martinique, and that's really that's where the trail kind of goes cold. But I thought it was really an interesting situation that a ship built here on Beaubears Island travels really all over the world and gets involved in a pretty major military event in the world's history, one of the wars of the French Revolution and eventually the Napoleonic Wars. At the same time, it should also be mentioned that we got another connection from Beaubears Island to that particular war. As I mentioned before, Napoleon does invade Egypt at this time, and the British Navy fights the Battle of the Nile in 1798 as well, in the course of what will become the War of the Second Coalition. So at the Battle of the Nile, the HMS Vanguard is the ship of Admiral Lord Horatio Nelson. I don't know that he was a lord just yet, but anyway, he was commanding in that particular conflict. And a midshipman aboard his command ship is one Joseph Russell. And Joseph Russell, of course, will go on and to own Beaubears Island and to build ships. He is actually the most prolific shipbuilder, building ships from 1838 until 1850. So again, it's kind of an interesting little sidebar there too, another connection to this larger military conflict at that time. So that's pretty much where we'll end things today. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was a little informative and maybe more than a little interesting. Like I say, if you have questions, do please let me know. If you have suggestions for further episodes, be sure to send those along as well. We'll have a poll up probably later on this afternoon. You can vote on what you'd like to see next week. But until then, have a great week, and we'll talk to you later.